Welcome to another Wisdom Pod, first of the year with Philip Lanos. He is a podcast host at Grit Daily News, interviewed 1.5K, 2K folks actually. 1.5 is me, or 1.7. So I was quite impressed with Phil, and apparently has some Oaxacan blood. I'm in
Yeah.
Oaxaca, Mexico. My wife is Oaxacan, so there's synchronicity, like Phil says here. Phil, welcome to Pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and about what you're up to nowadays.
Yeah, Charles, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's actually rare that I get to be on this side of the equation for podcasting, but I'm very grateful that the first pod of 2024 is with someone who literally celebrated New Year's in Oaxaca. Like, for me, that's awesome because I don't even get to talk about that at all in my daily life. And I live in Los Angeles, and there's such a large Oaxacan community, but they just go unseen because they don't want to cause trouble because they're just glad to be here, you know? So it's really cool to know that you were out there celebrating. It sounds like you have your family out there. And for me, I'm just stoked to be here.
I am stoked too. Oaxaca, well, it's one of the poorest states in Mexico, but it's one of the most pretty and culture-filled ones. It won best city of Mexico 4 years in a row, something like that. So lots of real estate potential. That's what I was telling my wife. I'm not a real estate guy, but if I was, I definitely invest heavily, and especially in the neighborhood that I'm in. It's like in the mountain. It's the rich neighborhood of Oaxaca, and there's a route here, and for ultra runners, for mountain bikers here. So I would definitely like buy a bunch of terrains here. And there's also the coast, the Oaxacan coast. Not sure if you've heard about, for example, Puerto Escondido or Huatulco. I got married there a couple months ago, and it's just beautiful and huge investment opportunity as well. Granted that Tulum is fully populated. Are you into these things?
Well, first of all, no, I think it's awesome that you even go like running and like all those things. I need to get back into that. I live such a sedentary lifestyle, and being on Zoom calls all day, and then by the time I'm done, I should feel like going out and running. But the LA smog and it's not the same, you know what I mean? But also congratulations on being recently married. That's super cool. And you did it in Oaxaca, man. Salud.
By the beach.
Oh, that's beautiful, man.
Wasn't easy though. Like wedding, need to first work hard in the relationship. Second, a wedding cost a shit ton. So
Oh
um
man.
yeah, it was grind. Last year was grind. Let's do it. In addition of that, actually, what did you accomplish last year, and have you done your yearly review yet? What will be your goals this year?
It's funny is I've been trying to get myself to do this the entire last week, but I just ended up making playlists on Spotify, and like I probably make more playlists on Spotify than actually listening to music. I'll listen for certain tones, feelings, and just get that going. And for me, it's almost like something to do while my brain is in the background thinking about what I'm building up to, right? I'm convinced, I haven't been diagnosed, obviously, but I'm convinced that I have some kind of ADHD or something because I always end up doing other things instead of doing the thing that I want to do and know I should do. But it's been on my mind for the last week. I told myself I would do it today, shortly after our podcast, actually. But I have not had the time to reflect. I will say I'm very grateful that although I used to be part of Entrepreneur Magazine and Inc. Magazine, and that was super exciting, and I found a lot of who I am in being able to do that and start interviewing because before that I was launching podcasts, right? Uh, Being able to do it with Grit Daily and seeing how the team does it, it's not as scaled up as Entrepreneur Inc. or something like that, but it purports the same value proposition, right? And so to see it and be able to be a part of that growth and to work with, Jordan French and Spencer who's on the team and just watch how we have other people who are contractors and this and that, but to watch how a tight-knit team is trying to build a publication in the modern day age is fascinating, especially when we have all these crazy tools that are promising to disrupt anything you're trying to attempt at all at every single angle, every single day. So yeah, I haven't taken the time.
I remember Jordan, now and the Grit Daily group. Uh, who have you interviewed that was Jordany, and what have you learned from these uh, trailblazers type of human beings?
Interesting. Uh, what have I learned from people that I've interviewed who I believe have some of the same qualities of entrepreneurialism as Jordan? Um, for me, is one thing that I've noticed about entrepreneurs that are like successful that lead teams is that they're always willing to tell you exactly where things are in terms of transparency, right? Like 100% transparency is key, even when it doesn't benefit them. Like it might even cut into how much they could earn off of your own labor or what have you, if you're on their team or contracting with them or what have you. That ability to be completely transparent and to explain the thinking behind the decisions they're about to make, that particular quality, like if we're going to let someone go on the team, they call the entire team and tell them, here's the reason why we're about to do this, including the person who is being let go from the team. Right now, certain structures, corporate structures, don't allow for that all the time. But for most startup culture, they're able to do that, or they'll have that conversation with that person, have them be let go, and then explain to the team, here's exactly why we made that decision so that it fosters a sense of trust in between all of that, right? So that's workplace culture and things of that nature. But most of the people that I interviewed who had that sort of growth that exploded and they were able to secure more capital or scale up their company fundamentally had that as one of their obvious qualities.
Right. And you've interviewed Amy Porterfield and these kind of successful folks that we've heard on many podcasts. How do you make a good interview happen and ask the right question at the right moment?
Well, I think first of all, you'll give me too much credit. So I have interviewed these people, but also they're amazing people. So anything you could ask them, they already have their own answers, and they're so well prepped. Especially someone like Amy Porterfield, who is illustrious when it comes to creating courses, right? Like you want to create a course, speak with Amy Porterfield in some capacity. You take her class; it's available. You know, you can even learn it from the mobile app. People like Rand Fishkin, right, who pioneered SEO in a way that nobody had ever seen with his Whiteboard Fridays, right? I remember I was working at a digital marketing agency in Brooklyn, New York, and I was like, I need to learn SEO if I'm going to be any good at my job. I come across Whiteboard Fridays with Moz SEO. I'm watching Rand Fishkin sit here and take his time pointing things out on how I need to view and understand SEO. And I'm like, oh, that's super cool. I go off on my own afterwards. I'm building podcasts and I'm thinking of starting a podcast. And this is maybe 2014. And I'm like, you know what? I hit him up on Twitter. I said, hey, Rand, here's what I'm doing with my podcast. Here's the general idea of it. Would you be willing to be a guest? Maybe even 30 minutes. It's not like I had that kind of pull yet. You know what I mean? So I was very fortunate that he said yes, which just goes to show what kind of cool guy he is. Right. And so we get on the podcast. And to be honest, I've had him on twice now. I had another show I was doing and I was able to bring him back on for his new company, Spark Toro, which is an audience intelligence tool. Right. And I'll get into that. But the first time I had him on, it felt very natural, very, very easy. But it's because a good guest will do a lot of heavy lifting, but it doesn't excuse you from not being a good host. A good host, fundamentally, what I've seen is you just have to have a general curiosity, right? But more importantly, the ability to listen, right? And so for anybody who's interested in that, and what I'm doing right now with this value that I'm about to drop, right? This is what interviewing people like Amy Porterfield or Rand Fishkin do, is they'll just immediately start to provide value whether you asked for it or not, right? And obviously you did, you started talking about them. So getting back to what I was saying, this is what I've learned about the ability to listen, right? And active listening in particular. There's actively accepting, actively rejecting, or actively confused, right? But either one of those, you're in a state of either one of those when speaking to someone. And you're either accepting what they're saying and the conversation is going to move forward, actively rejecting, and you may have a rebuttal. Or if you're actively confused, ask a question. What are you confused about? I didn't understand that, right? And as long as you're doing that, actively, the conversation will flourish. Right. And so that's the kind of insights and systematic breakdowns that a lot of people like Amy Porterfield, Rand Fishkin, or Joe Pulizzi, whoever it may have been that I've interviewed, will do in a conversation. And it's because they did the thinking for you. Anyone who wants to be a thought leader, do the thinking for others ahead of time. And then when someone asks you, you already thought about that.
Does talking about stuff that they already talked about stimulate their brain? How can you ask unique questions or approach unique angles that will get their brain to sparkle like fireworks?
Well, see, okay, first of all, that's a great question, right? Like the way you just did that there. And that's not a question that most people would likely be ready to ask, right? They may go deeper into the subject that I just may have talked about or what have you, but you yourself are inherently curious about how to light a fire in someone whenever speaking to them, right? So by default, your questions are going to be interesting because of your goal, right? So I think you can ask any question to anyone, especially because, like you said, these people may have said the same thing over and over to people on podcasts. Nothing worse than someone who has like a list of 25 questions they ask every single guest every single time, right? If you're doing that and you have an interview podcast, you're doing it wrong. I fundamentally guarantee that. But as far as lighting a fire in someone, like like you just pointed out, with your question and what it looks like for to have a good question, it's because it's inherently tied to a specific goal, right? Now, somebody might have someone of a strong personal brand or substance come onto the show and they're excited and they have their list of questions that they've been asking and they're going to ask them. And they're like, oh, hopefully they're not bored, right? Well, if you're not excited, they definitely won't be excited, but you can't fake excitement either. I'm not saying to show up like a radio show host. Hi, how you doing? Yeah, thank you for coming to the show. But all that's too much energy. It's misplaced, right? A podcast is inherently different from a radio show. You're not here to wake somebody up at 7 in the morning. You're here to have an intimate discussion, conversation about some real results. So, how do you be interesting? How do you ask great questions that light people up, even though they've answered these a million times or what have you? It's about your goal. Have an interesting goal, right? Someone says, okay, my goal here is to derive insights for business owners who listen to my podcast. Is that really your goal? If you have X person on here, your main goal is to ask them that. Like you right now, even if you didn't have a goal initially, let's say you're like, I don't know, but this seems like it's going to be a great conversation. I bring that up and you say, okay, but how do you keep it interesting? How do you keep it spicy when everyone is so bored? Well, what's your goal? For you, you want to know the mechanics of someone's internals. What is it about, like, immediately, what is it about you as a host that is able to keep a conversation like that going in a way that makes it feel natural, compelling, and moving forward? By default, because that's your inherent goal, at least in this moment, that's what makes it magical. It's kind of meta, it's kind of abstract, but it's important because without those ingredients, that's like not putting salt on something that should have had a little bit of salt.
Talking about sodium, you're a caffeine like me. I think that
Yeah.
biochemistry is quite important when you interview someone. I do have adequate dosage of caffeine in my brain right now. My favorite mix is, well, apart from the thousands of teas that I drink on a daily basis, is a coffee and yerba mate, which you
Ooh,
probably know. That one
yeah.
is so brutal when it comes to, yeah, firing the neurons at the right spots. How do you prepare yourself from a biochemistry, biohacker perspective before interviews? How do you make sure that you're lit up, but not too lit up? Because sometimes I was over caffeinated and I spoke to my idols, people that I really put on a pedestal out there, and I was nervous as hell. My heart was pounding and I had too much caffeine. So, what's your tip on that?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. I never get a chance to talk about these things because most of the people I spend time with uh, don't care about this. But for me, it's actually one of the facets of my life that I never get a chance to talk about. So I'm a big fan of alpha GPC, right? And cognizin, right? Which are two totally different. It's like CDP acetylcholine, right? But together they make an interesting combination. I generally combine it with what's the word I'm looking for right now? Lion's mane, right? And I have a lion's mane creamer. I think there's a creamer called Laird's Creamer. If you haven't heard of it, I when I took a look at the ingredients, overall, it's pretty nice. It's not as heavy as others, and it still adds a nice flavor. It's coconut milk, which I know isn't everyone's favorite, right? I've learned the hard way that people do not care for milk alternatives. Totally understand that. But essentially, its main ingredient is lion's mane, right? I combine that obviously in a cold brew. I do not have a deep understanding of how cold brew is made, but I do know that it's made for me. You know what I mean? And then
It's
of
cold
course,
coffee. That's what it
yeah,
is.
yeah, you know. And then I also combine that with let's see, I have a B12 vitamin, the methylcobalamin, right? In particular is important. And then huperzine is another one. And then there's one in particular I've recently been trying, and I got to tell you, I feel great about it, is octosanol. Have you heard of this? Octosanol is predominantly, I believe it's some kind of protein that helps with hand-eye coordination, right? But there's something that it does in the ability to focus, and I came across it while scouring Amazon for a new nootropic, which is something I do on my free time, unfortunately. And there was like a study pack of vitamins and supplements that was from some company in Korea. I wish I knew the name. It's a shame that I don't have that. I probably need something from memory there. Some more ginseng or ginkgo biloba. But generally speaking, octosanol, I found so far has been really kicking my ass and putting me into gear. But I usually take all that before I start my day. It's become a ritual. And I find that as long as I do that, my day's going great. I probably have more nootropics than most people do. A lot of it probably just goes out to waste from my body, right? But I find that without that, even if it did nothing for me, even if it was just a placebo, the fact that I checked those boxes, I'm able to start my day. It's like permission to start my day at my best self, whether or not those supplements actually have any science behind them. The days that I don't do it is a big difference.
Nice stack, dude. 99.9% of humans do not biohack. And surprisingly, even in the CEO population, I mean, biohack, use nootropics, right? You said, yeah, that you would need a supplement to forget. I often tweet about that. I call it the human condition. I forget like what's the main meaning of the human condition, but to me, the human condition is that we forget. Um, and that justifies why you and I are not billionaires right now. Um, if we would forget, if we would remember everything with the help of a GPT or an AI to constantly remind us to take that little action today that will generate $17,000 tomorrow, which literally is something that could be done in my pipeline, in my world, right? But I just don't know because my brain forgets. Or if you would water the plant so that wife doesn't get angry, small stuff like that. I think as humans, we forget a lot, and forgetting is also related to cognition, right? When you think about it, sometimes you don't know stuff because you don't remember that fact and don't cross link it with this other fact. Um, your full stack, I've taken like every single thing in there. My first company was a nootropic company, for the audience that must already know that. And Alpha GPC was our main competitor. Aubrey Marcus. Oh, okay. Alpha GPC, you don't mean Alpha Brain. Yeah, I've
Yeah,
brain
yeah.
mistaken that, but Alpha GPC is good. Alpha Brain's also recommended for people that are listening. The on it, which is Aubrey de Grey,
Right, right.
Aubrey Marcus, not de Grey, his company. So that's a good stack right there. And glad that you take all of these things. I also recommend for Lion's Mane's Four Sigmatic. Have you
Yeah.
tried them? The coffee, mushroom coffee?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've seen like all those products, right? And I'm generally what's the word I'm looking for? I'm generally biased to building my own stack as opposed to taking the one pill has all those in there. Usually it doesn't have enough milligrams for me for what I'm looking for in that one pill for each thing, right? So I'll just build my own stack. But I have seen those products and I've tried them. and they are good. It's just not as good as I want it to be, right? Like I love Four Sigmatic, right? But I also make my coffee a certain way, and so it might take a little more effort. But for me, that's part of my ritual.
I have a hell of a ritual for you regarding that. Try to get nerdier or more biohacker than that. So I actually go out in Canada and I chop my own chaga off
Whoa.
trees. Yeah. So me and my brother, we're not that tall, so last time I went there, I had to go on his shoulders with an axe and chop the chaga off the top of a birch tree.
Wow.
And then you grind it and then you put it in your coffee. And you said one thing, because we don't have much time, but placebo is interesting. Um, my opinion on placebo is that it's for dumb people. People that are aware and have high IQ usually do not can feel placebo. I mean, it doesn't. I don't need any scientific literature to know and to observe the effect of caffeine. I
Right.
did it so many times on my body. It's been like a decade now, not a century, that I've been consuming coffee 2 cups a day. So that's like 3,000 experiments on my own body, right? And then you take notes. So, well, one last question before we go. Small comment on placebo, but it's related to ADHD. Do you feel that this stack helps you focus? Because I found that if you have the correct mindset and the correct mind tools, I'm ADHD and I don't believe in the word diagnosis, but I feel it's a superpower in my case because I get to act very quick on some stuff and I check so many items. I combine that with biohacking, with meditation, and ADHD has become this superpower. So does this stack help or worsen your ADHD? And what tools do you have to take all that energy and focus it into one laser ray?
Yeah. I found that if I don't exercise, it doesn't matter what stack I take or what have you, I'm just simply all over the place. And whatever grabs my attention, right? But it's because I can hyper focus in that way. Problem is, it's not that my mind isn't prepared to do things, it's that my body hasn't woken up yet. And I find my suspicion, and I don't have any scientific basis for this, but I find that as an entertainer, I spent a lot of time learning how to sing, and I wanted to be like an actor and a singer for many years. And it didn't pan out the way that I thought it would. But one of the things that was important was in order to do your best performance on a stage, you had to be in your body, not in your mind, in your head, right? And any time, any day that I do not wake up my body, become one with it, some people can achieve that through meditation, some sort of a dual hemisphere centering, if you will, right? I literally need to move my body. If I don't, doesn't matter how much tyrosine or whatever branch chain amino acid or any nootropic that I take, it's not going to do it for me. There are just some things that come with movement, that activate with movement. And for me, if there was any greatest biohack, regardless of supplement, it's do some exercise as soon as you possibly can, no matter how you feel. And I don't do it every morning. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. I don't. But I find that the days that I do makes a huge difference. Huge difference.
Hell yeah. I could not live without sports nowadays. And my goal this year is that so usually I exercise twice a day. Now it's gonna be 3 times, Why put a
Wow.
cap on that? So one would be a 30-minute uphill run with the dogs. Second could be Apple Fit, and third would be the gym. But
Yeah.
that's me. It's like the bonkers goals, right? Like I want to bodybuild to from 160 to 200 this year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's gonna be
Okay.
interesting. Where can people find out more about you, Phil?
Sure. So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. If any of you are looking, right, you can go to my website. I try to keep it updated. I spend a lot of time on Zoom calls, so I don't get a lot of time to go update my website. But it is Philip with two L's, Phillip, Lanos, .com. Right. Same thing with any social media. You could Google me, and a million things should come up. Probably nothing good, but but go ahead and Google me. I should come up, and I'm very approachable. I don't believe there's such a thing as a dumb question. Any question is fine.